Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. Super excited about tonight's topic, and I know I say that literally every time I go live. I just can't pick a favorite, friends. I really can't. When it comes to comprehension or reading, it's all my favorite. So I hope you're tuning in with me tonight. Grab a drink, grab a seat, or if you're catching the replay, thank you so much for joining. My name is Sierra Harris, and I am the author over at Sierra Harris Teaching. And I love coming to you live every Wednesday night, or replays, of course, on Facebook and YouTube, and talking with you all about everything that has to do with comprehension. So tonight was a request from a few of my teachers in my Facebook group, and they really wanted me to talk through about how to plan out your reading block. So that's what we're going to chat about tonight. I have 10 tips for you to kind of think through that will hopefully apply to anyone and everyone who teaches reading. And it does not matter if you are a workshop model or non-workshop model. I didn't know what else to say there. So hopefully it applies to you regardless of your curriculum and what mandates that you have. Just some great reflective questions and things to think about to help make your reading block the best it could possibly be. All right? So if you haven't done so already, make sure to drop a comment below and let me know that you're here. Let me know what grade you teach and where you're from. And your question for tonight is, how many minutes do you have for your reading block? I typically had a 90-minute reading block when I was in the classroom, and that 90 minutes was for reading only. It did not include writing. And so when we think about tonight, I do want you to try and focus only on the reading section. Know that this stuff can apply to writing, and if your writing and your reading are kind of merged together, what we're going to talk about tonight is more for the reading section, okay? So try to separate those two components just for tonight in our discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some great tips and things to think about to help you plan out and schedule the best reading block that is best for you and your students. Know that no matter what we talk about tonight, when what you walk away with, how you design your reading block is right for you. There is no one perfect way. There are thousands of perfect ways. It's really all about being purposeful on how you design your reading block, being intentional behind everything that you do in your reading block, and keeping your students' goals in mind, which we'll get to later, and then also being consistent and having that consistency behind not changing up your reading block every few weeks or every month. You're going to want to find something that works for you, that you enjoy, and that you're able to get in what you need to get in and keep it the same all year long. All right? So let's jump in. Like I said, tonight I have 10 different kind of tips or reflective questions. I don't know what else to call them. We'll just call them tips. 10 different tips for you tonight when it comes to planning out your reading block. And I do have a little freebie for you, a little template that will help you answer some of the questions we're going to talk about tonight. And I will give you the link to that in the comments below and in the description of the video. All right. So you're going to be able to grab that whenever you can and print it out and have it if you need it or want it. So let's jump right in. I've got my notes right here. So if you see my eyes going over to the side, know that's where my notes are. All right. So the first thing that I want to chat about when it comes to designing out your reading block is to make sure that you have sat and thought about your goals. What are your goals for your reading block? And so your goals for your reading block are going to hopefully reflect the needs of your students, as well as your philosophy of teaching. So for example, I know comprehension is the key to success in many areas for my students. When I taught second and third grade, we were still learning how to read, especially with a hard focus on comprehension. So that was one of my goals. It was a heavy comprehension focus. And I knew that, and I knew they needed that in order to be successful in grades 4 and 5, when now we're integrating subjects like science, history, social studies, etc., and even more than when you get into middle school, where they have to be able to comprehend in order to learn the content, right? So I needed that to be a focus of mine in order to allow my students to be successful in the future. So that was one of my goals. Another one of my goals was engagement. You know, I talk about engagement all the time when I'm on here. And my philosophy of engagement is there is 100% of participation in every lesson from every student. So at any given time, I can say, for a matter of fact, that 100% of my kids were engaged in the lesson for reading, for math, for all of my lessons, really. So engagement was a goal of mine. Another goal of mine was differentiation and meaningful learning. I use the word meaningful, and I wish I could write it in like bold letters, all caps, and tattoo it across my forehead, because that is huge for me. I will not give my students something that I know does not have a true purpose for them. I'm not going to give them busy work. I'm not going to fill centers with just something that I'm going to go, oh, great, you did it. Thanks. And it kind of goes and gets pushed under the rug. I want things to be meaningful for me, and I want things to be meaningful for them. So those were my goals when I was in the classroom when it came to my reading block. And those goals helped me to design my best reading block. So that's something that you're going to want to take time to do, is to sit down and kind of reflect. What are your goals? What is your teaching philosophy? How does your teaching philosophy impact the design behind your reading block? So for me, since comprehension was such a big focus, I knew that the majority of my time in that reading block was going to be spent on comprehension. So when I was actually mapping out, how much time for centers or stations and how much time for my whole group lesson and this and that, then I knew a large chunk of that time needed to be spent on comprehension. So I was okay saying I'm going to have a 40-minute whole group lesson, even for second grade, because I knew they needed it. I knew that's what they needed. That's what our goal was. That's what their need and our focus was. And that made it okay for me to block that much time off. So, and then when I thought about the other components or the other goals that I had set as far as engagement and meaningful, then that helped me reflect the other components of my reading block. Was our centers really meaningful to me? And we're going to get into some great questions about centers and stations here in a minute. But were they really that meaningful? And how can I make them better for my students and for me? Was my engagement level where it needed to be throughout my entire block? And how can I rearrange my block to make it more engaging for my students? So that's the first thing that I want you to do, is think about your goals. What are your goals for your reading block? What are your core beliefs? And how can those impact your block? So on your template today, that is actually the very first question, and you've got a little spot to kind of reflect and jot down some of those ideas. And that may seem a little floofy, right? But you know me, I don't floof around. I like that saying. I don't floof around. I don't. I am telling you what is the first step to designing out the best reading block you could possibly have. And it needs to start there. What are your goals and what are your core beliefs when it comes to reading instruction? Okay. All right. So number two is that when you are looking at your block, and this is a great thing to kind of think about and reflect on past years, and then to incorporate, of course, for your upcoming year when we get to face, right? Is that the majority of the time in your reading block should be a reflection of what the majority of your students need, okay? So when you are planning out your block, if you are teaching first grade and you know that the majority of your students need phonics and decoding skills, right? That is your biggest need, 100%, right? That is what the majority of your time should be spent on. Now, that may change throughout the year. especially in first grade when we go from really the phonics and phonemic awareness and decoding to really being readers, you may have a shift from first semester to second semester. So your biggest time chunk in your reading block should be spent on phonics. Comprehension and the other pieces like fluency, and vocabulary, those can be spent elsewhere, maybe in a mini lesson somewhere else on another day. Maybe you incorporate them into centers and small groups. But if the majority of your kids, their biggest need is decoding, then that should reflect the biggest chunk of your time in your reading block. So going back again to my classroom with being second and third grade, my kids needed comprehension. That's their biggest need. Therefore, that's why 40 minutes of my 90-minute reading block was devoted to comprehension every day. That's what we did. Now, I did a 10-minute mini lesson on phonics and vocabulary, and I rotated those back and forth. So, for example, Monday was a 10-minute phonics lesson, and Tuesday was a 10-minute vocab. Then 10-minute phonics, 10-minute vocab, and then Friday was like a mixture of both with an assessment on what we've been working on. So yes, I know those are both needs. Clearly, I want to make sure that I hit all of the components of the literacy in my reading block throughout the week, but I have to make sure, what do my kids need right now? All of them need phonemic awareness. If you're in kindergarten, then that's it. That's what we focus on for the majority of the time. If all of your kids need comprehension, then that's your biggest focus. So when you go to actually plan out your reading block and you're chunking out times for everything, the biggest majority of the time should be spent on what your kids need. So make sure that mirrored reflection is there, okay? All right. Next, and I'm going to make a quick change to the order of what I was going to say. Last minute changes here, right? All right, so number 3, when thinking about your reading block, you want to make sure that you purposefully include all 5 components of literacy throughout the week, okay? Now, I know that there are many administrators out there who say they need to be there all in one day, but here's what I say to that. Quality over quantity. I cannot intentionally and meaningfully and purposefully teach 5 things in one 90-minute block well every single day, right? I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better if I can focus on a few of those at a time each day. So for example, my phonemic awareness lessons were more so done in centers because it's second grade. Phonemic awareness should be one of the last things, right, that should be falling off the wayside. Hopefully most of my students are solid in their understanding of phonemic awareness, and I don't need to focus on that. That does not need to be a component for me every day. Same with fluency. At second and third grade especially, the majority of my students, hopefully, don't need a lot of fluency work. Now, there are going to be your exceptions to everything, right? We're going to have pockets of students who do need those. And then I can address those as needed in my small groups. Or I can have centers based on fluency, right? Or I may have a random mini lesson, or I may embed it into my comprehension lessons, or I may embed it into my small groups, or wherever it fits naturally. But I cannot every single day fit all 5 of those components well and teach them well every single day. So when you're planning out your reading block, I want you not to think about it as a whole day. I actually want you to plan out a reading block as your week. And that way you can fit in pieces of your 5 components of reading into your week rather than into every single day, okay? And if you are interested, I will drop I have a picture or an image of my ideal reading block. Again, it's 90 minutes and it does not include writing or grammar. I will drop that into the comments for you to see. And I know you're probably going to have a lot of questions about it because it's kind of crazy. And it may include some terms that you're unfamiliar with. So feel free to ask questions and I will do my best to answer them in the comments. But I will put that down there, that way you can see what I mean. So when you're planning out your block, again, don't plan it like every day. Every day does not have to be the same thing. So my Mondays and my Wednesdays mirrored each other. My Tuesdays and my Thursdays mirrored each other. And then my Friday was a day all in of itself. So, but you better believe in that whole week, I did have enough time devoted to the 5 components of literacy that reflected the needs of my students. So again, if you are kindergarten and first grade, your focus is going to be more on that phonemic awareness and phonics with lots more fluency and a little bit comprehension. And then on the flip side, if you're upper, you're going to have the complete opposite of that. So your week, right, should be a good reflection of that. But you do need to make sure that you have all 5 components embedded into your week. Okay? All right. So on your page here, and I meant to mention this on the last step. The second thing you're going to write down is what do most of your students need? So we did talk about that on step 2 to make sure that you are looking at the needs of your students. You're going to write that down on your page. And then we're moving on to number 4. So number 4 is now when we kind of get into the words are hard. The logistics of everything. So you, obviously, as a teacher, you probably, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but most likely have influencers into your reading block. What I mean by influencers is you have mandates of what you have to use in your reading block, aka your curriculum. Maybe you have things like accelerated reader, or if your dear time, if that has to be done during your 90-minute block. Hopefully it's not in your 90-minute block. Hopefully it's on the outside. But there's that. Do you have push-in help? Do you have an aide that comes in? Do you have a resource teacher who pushes in, or an ELL teacher who pushes in? Do you have to use a certain phonics program? Do you have digital content that you have to use, like 𝗦cie? Or I'm trying to think of another reading program, digital program. Like, is that something that you have to do in your reading block? What are the influences? What are the things that are mandated for you to do in your reading block? You need to write all of those out, okay? So on your page, that's the next step, is to write out all of your influencers, because you're going to want to make sure you have a place to say, yes, I'm doing everything I'm told to do and that I have to do in your reading block within the week. Again, you may want to clarify whether or not you need to do those every single day. Do they need to have a certain number of minutes? And then how can you split out those minutes maybe every day or every other day? So if they have to be on 𝗦cie for, 60 minutes a week, then maybe you split it up 20 minutes at a time. Or maybe you split it up 30 minutes at a time and you do half the classes on 𝗦cie while the half the class is getting, a more focused, differentiated comprehension lesson that day, or whatever lesson that day. There's a lot of different ways you can think about that, but you want to make sure that your influencers are taken care of. What do you have to do? Write out those influencers and make sure that when you're designing your reading block that those go into place, okay? All right, number 5 is one of the biggest and most important steps, okay? You want to make sure that you are writing out everything that you need in your reading block. And then the biggest step is determining how important it is and how often it needs to be done, okay? So on your paper, that's the next section, and I did make it the biggest section because I have a feeling we're going to do a lot more writing there. But here's what I mean by that. If you know that you're going to need to do a phonics lesson, you're going to need to do some kind of word work, you're going to need to have a vocabulary lesson, you're going to need to have response to text for comprehension, you need to have a comprehension mini lesson, you need to do an interactive read aloud. Like, what are all of those literacy components that you know you're going to need to do? Now, there may be some overlap. Some of your influencers may become components. They may not. It kind of depends. But what are all of those components of your literacy block that you know you need to do? Write those out, and then you're going to rank them. You're going to say, this one is the most important. This one is the least important. This one is, middle. Maybe rank them. Maybe if there ends up being 10, rank them from 1 to 10. Or you could do a star system. This, if it's really important, it gets 3 stars. If it's not very important, it gets 1 star, etc. And then that right there is going to help you figure out how much time you're going to devote to each of those pieces when you're designing out your week. So again, back to me for my example. When I was teaching second and third grade, obviously phonemic awareness or word work really got 1 star. I didn't do a lot of works. I had phonics in the like I did a 10-minute mini lesson twice a week, and that was a reflection of the fact that it was only a 1 star for me. Now comprehension, like whole group, and this is where you can even write down whole group lessons, small group lessons, anything you can think of that needs to be a part of your reading block is going to be written down. And then you're going to rank those out. And then when you get all of them ranked, then you can visually see, okay, now I know if it gets 3 stars, meaning it's really important and I need to do it every day, then I'm going to start with that. That gets a big chunk of time and that gets put every day. Then maybe my 1 stars. Okay, how many 1 stars do I have? Oh, I've got 3 of them. So maybe I go every other on 2 of them and I do the third one on Friday. Boom, I just hit all of those, right? So you can be very creative with how you put everything in, but the important part is the important things are getting the majority of the time. The least important things are getting the less amount of time. And so that's good to have that type of reflection in your block. So again, on your paper, you're going to write out all of the different components and you're going to rank them however makes sense to you and think about how important that they are and how much time you think they should get. And then you're going to use this section to actually help plan out your chunk of time. Whether you get 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, whatever that reading chunk, remember, we're going to try to keep writing outside of this for right now. But whatever that reading chunk is, then you're going to devote those pieces in there, all right? All right, so just my last, I think 5, right, we're on number 6. My last 5 or 4 pieces are going to be more things to think about and ideas that you can use to help make your reading block a little bit different and a little bit easier, right? So one of the things that you're going to want to think about is all of the transitions that you do in your classroom. So if you do centers or if you have kids that come to you for reading that aren't necessarily in your homeroom, for example, like if you teach 3rd or 4th grade and you have departmentalized classes, so kids are coming to you for reading and they're leaving for math and all the whatever that looks like. Think about your transitions. So give your transitions the time that they deserve. And you know, right? We all have a goal. Oh, I want to be able to transition from center to center within like 60 seconds. But in reality, how much time does it really take? So think about that reality time. Like how much time do your transitions actually take? Also think about unpacking at the beginning of the reading block and packing up at the end. Like putting all your stuff away, putting papers away, putting materials back at the end when you're done with your lesson, whatever. All of those transition pieces, you want to like shave those off. So when you plan out your reading block, you know that, you know what, 10 minutes of this reading block, maybe 7 minutes hopefully of this reading block is going to be just transitions. So when I plan out my whole reading block, I'm only going to plan it for 80 minutes instead of 90. And that way I have realistic expectations of how much time I can actually devote to each of these components, knowing that I have a few minutes of cushion time for those transitions. And I'm not going, oh my gosh, it's time for fluency and I'm just not finishing word work. And now we're behind and now you're behind for the next one. And now you're behind for the next one. We have to remember that transitions are a part of our everyday life and we need to give those the time that they deserve. So think about your transitions, add them all up, subtract that time from the end, and then plan your reading block from there, knowing that you're going to have those cushions in place, okay? Another thing that you can try if you are, feeling like you want something different this year, try an A-B schedule. I kind of mentioned it when I was referring back to mine where I said Mondays and Wednesdays reflect each other and Tuesdays and Thursdays reflect each other. Your reading block does not need to look the exact same every single day. You can easily do an A-B schedule to, one, give some variety in your week. Your kids, they need something a little bit different. You need something a little bit different. So an A-B schedule may just be something that you need. So instead of doing, a 30-minute comprehension lesson on Mondays and Wednesdays, maybe if you're 1st and 2nd grade, maybe you do a more, in-depth phonics lesson on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So really, if both of those are very heavy for grades 1 and 2, which they are, then maybe that's how you balance it out, right? Rather than doing 20-minute comprehension and 20-minute phonics and 20-minute this, again, going back to what I said about it's very hard to do all 5 of those components really well every single day, quality over quantity. So that A-B schedule may be a way for you to think about doing more wholesome, meaningful, purposeful teaching to where you can really dive into the instruction, really let your students collaborate, really let the learning sink in, let them try, get their hands dirty, and then get that independent work in to see how they're doing. That way you can better serve them. So that A-B schedule may be something that you want to try, okay? All right, number 8, we're on our last 3. Number 8 is a big one, and this is one that I would highly, highly recommend for all teachers. When it comes to centers, so I know reading centers are important. They really, really are. Having that small group time for your kids, necessary, 1,000%. But I highly encourage you to take yourself out of the rotation. Okay? If you do reading rotations, which we're actually going to talk about rotations here in just a second. If you do reading rotations, meaning like they're going to center number 1, then they go to center 2, then they go to center 3, and then they're to B, right? And you have a group coming to you at each time. I highly recommend taking yourself out of the rotation. And here's why. Your purpose in teaching kids in small group is to give students what they need at that moment in time, right? That moment in time changes week from week. So unless you are constantly changing your reading groups, and by constantly, I mean every week, which that's a hassle to do, right? I don't want to have to change my bulletin board or my PowerPoint slides, and I don't want to have to tell kids like, okay, look what group you're in now. It's changed from last week, and then the next week you're in another group. Look what group you're in now. That's all a pain, right? I want my kids to have a system in place. I want them to be able to know what group they're in and know that they're going to be in that group for a little while. They may change maybe every few months, but they're going to be in that group for a while. But me, my job needs to be more flexible than that. I need to know that these 5 students, they struggled last week on main idea. Therefore, I'm going to pull them for a strategy group on main idea, right? And they may be 5 that would never have been in the same group if I had them in set groups. So it's really important that I keep myself out of the rotation. That way I can say, I need these 5 students. And another thing, too, is it allows your schedule to be more flexible as well. You may not need to work with a group for 20 whole minutes. Maybe you meet with 3 kids because you're working on this specific phonics skill, and after 15 minutes, we're good to go. I can see that they understand and they're going to practice on their own, and I'll confer with them a little later, and I send them on their way. But then maybe the next group I pull over, 20 minutes isn't going to be enough. Maybe this group we're working on making inferences. And 20 minutes and making inferences, that's hard to do. So we're going to spend 25 minutes, and I need to be okay with the fact that I want 25 minutes with this group of kids because that's what we need. And then the next group, maybe I meet with them for 10 minutes because, again, it's something I just need to check in real quick. And then if I need to do a running record or if I need to confer with certain students, I have the ability to do that without messing anything up. So completely taking yourself out of the rotation allows you to do what you need to do for your students and when they need it, okay? And this is a question I get asked a lot. If I take myself out of the rotation, right, then obviously I'm pulling kids from all these different centers at different times. What do I do about the work that they missed? Let it be. What is more important, your instruction with them or busy work that you gave them, even if it's meaningful, which we talked about how we're going to be better, right, at making meaningful work in centers. Even if it is meaningful, if they're doing task cards, if they're doing, a response to text, if they're independent reading, whatever they're doing at that moment that you pull them from, they get to miss that work, and it is perfectly okay. It is hopefully not something that you are grading, right? Hopefully. Because you cannot verify whether or not they are talking about or about whatever, or I could go on and on. We don't grade centers. But when they are with you, that is what their focus is, and they shouldn't have to make up work because you pulled them, right? So it's just a matter of being very purposeful and being okay with my center work not being complete 100% of the time because of the students that I'm pulling. It's extra practice. My center work is extra practice on things that we have already taught. Okay? All right. Keeping on centers, number 9 is something else that I really want you to think about as something being very different. And you're going to see this when I put my example in the comments. Again, I'm going to put a picture in the comments of my ideal reading block. You're going to see this happening. Stations do not need to be a rotation model, okay? They don't have to be. So your station time can be actually stations. For example, maybe you have your lower students, that group, and they are working on phonemic awareness or phonics. And so if you have 30 minutes for stations, then they get 30 minutes to go do a 30-minute purposeful activity, independently or with partners. You have something set in place, you've given them directions, and they go do that. Then maybe your higher kids, maybe they're working on literature circles. And then maybe your on-level kids are working with you. So during station time, it's just boom. It's like purposeful group time, really. It's not station rotation. So it's just something different to think about, and it gives more of a purpose behind what you're doing rather than giving that, again, that busy work when it's what really are we doing other than just kind of filling in our time. So you'll see the examples when I post my photo down below in the comments, and I'll do that as soon as the video is over. But just something to think about. It is perfectly okay if you say, okay, I have 30-40 minutes for stations, but instead of doing stations, I'm going to do purposeful group work. And so I'm going to allow my higher students to focus on Greek and Latin root words or prefixes and suffixes, and we're going to push and do that. And my main group, we're going to work with an aide. She's going to come in, and we're going to do more work with comprehension. And then my lower group, they're going to meet with me, and we're going to do more phonics and decoding skills. And again, you can change that. Maybe that's Monday and Wednesday, and maybe Thursday or Tuesday, Thursday, you do something different for station time. Okay, maybe you meet with the high kids and the low kids get some independent time. And then it doesn't have to be this quick, I'm at 15 minutes and 15 minutes and 15 minutes. Go back to that. What is it meaningful? Is it purposeful? Is it busy work? What really could they be doing with their time to get more out of their learning, right? If you do a station rotation or a center rotation, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Just be purposeful about what you put into those centers, okay? And have a very strong system in place. Teach the students, know where to look and where to go. Have a consistent system where they know exactly where they belong each and every day at every time. Make sure it's not confusing for them or for you, okay? And then my last tip number 10, is to keep your centers consistent. So this would be if you are doing a center rotation, or if you're doing the idea like I gave where it's more of like purposeful groups. You want to be consistent, okay? So when they go to this corner on Mondays, it's always going to be comprehension, and it's always going to be a lakeshore game that looks like this, right? Because I have them all for all the skills, and that's what it's going to be. Then when they go to this one, it's going to be, fluency, and we're going to read some partner script passages. They're going to always have a partner script passages with some comprehension questions in them or something like that. And then when they go to this center, it's always going to be independent reading. Whatever you want your stations to be is fine, but keep them consistent. You don't want to be changing that every week because, one, it eats up your time having to explain every week. Okay, you're going to play this game at this station, and this is what you're going to do. And then this station, you're going to do this, and here's how you do it. You want every center to be the exact same every time. You just change out the materials that you use. Okay, so if you do independent reading, great. If you want to do comprehension and they have a page that they read and answer questions, then keep that way. Then this one they have, maybe if this one's always games. And then this one is listening to, a story on tape, or for, recording themselves for fluency, or whatever it may be. There's so many ideas that you can do for centers, but keep your centers consistent. Got it? All right. All right, so those were my 10 tips. I know that you are not walking away with a completely beautifully designed reading block. And honestly, with every one of you watching, there's no way to do that, because you all have different mandates. You all have different times. You all have different grade levels. So everything's going to be different. So just think through all 10 tips that I give you tonight. Use your planning sheet that I'm going to link here in just a minute. These are the core questions that I asked you. So look at your goals, your influences, your components, and rank them. That right there is going to help you then plop everything into place. And then again, I'm going to post the picture of mine below. It does not need to look like mine. Remember, every reading design, the way you plan and design your reading block, it's going to work. It's going to be fine. Just make it work for you and keep it consistent for your students. If you have any questions at all about anything we talked about tonight, or my reading example that I'm going to give you in the comments, just let me know. I'm happy to help. Hopefully some of the things we talked about tonight were helpful, and give you some food for thought when it comes to planning out your reading block, whether that's right now because you're going back face-to-face, or in the future when you do go back safely face-to-face, whatever that may be. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really enjoyed talking about reading blocks with you. Know that a lot of this can be applied to math and writing. It absolutely can. I just wanted to focus on reading because that's what our Wednesday nights are for, right? It's all about comprehension and reading. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you had a great time, and I appreciate you being here. I will talk to you all later. Bye.